Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Working from home, I mostly kept to myself and enjoyed good health. But everything took a turn after I decided to order some questionable takeout during a late-night work session to meet a client's deadline. The first day, I brushed it off as simple food poisoning. By day 3, I couldn't keep anything down, not even water. Every time I tried to eat or drink something, my body rejected it almost immediately. I was getting weaker by the hour, and the constant headaches weren't helping either. Finally, I managed to call my local doctor's office to book an appointment. When I explained my situation about vomiting for 3 days straight and not being able to keep any food or water down, the receptionist responded with complete attitude. She asked me what I expected her to do about it in a condescending tone. When I simply requested an appointment, she sighed heavily and told me the earliest she could get me in was 5:30 p.m. I tried explaining that was 8 hours away and asked if there was nothing sooner, but she just coldly told me to take it or leave it. I took the appointment, not having much choice. When I got up to start getting ready, the room was spinning. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashed some water on my face, and looked in the mirror. That's when I saw it. My pupils were completely different sizes. One was like a pinpoint, while the other was massively dilated. Terrified, I rushed to the doctor's office as fast as my weakened body could manage. The same receptionist was there, looking at me with complete disdain. I desperately pleaded with her for help, telling her something was really wrong and begging her to look at my eyes. She just smirked and told me I looked perfectly fine and should go home and wait for my appointment. Through my tears, I begged her to let me see a doctor, explaining about my uneven pupils and how scared I was. She just dismissed me, saying I was being dramatic and suggesting it was probably just makeup or something. She insisted I go home. I left, defeated and terrified. After a few hours of lying in bed, imagining all the worst possibilities, I decided I wasn't going to let this woman's attitude potentially cost me my life. I dragged myself back to the clinic. This time, a doctor happened to be walking through the reception area. She took one look at me and her entire demeanor changed. She exclaimed in shock and asked me to come over immediately, wanting to know how long my pupils had been like this. When I mentioned I tried telling the receptionist earlier, the doctor immediately grabbed my hand and announced she was calling an ambulance, saying this should have been handled hours ago. The doctor rushed to the reception desk, and I could hear her scolding the receptionist. She demanded to know how they could have let me leave earlier, explaining that unequal pupils were a medical emergency and I could have had a brain bleed. The receptionist stammered that she hadn't thought about it, to which the doctor pointed out that was exactly the problem. She wasn't qualified to make medical assessments. I tried to make my way to a chair, but everything went black. Next thing I knew, I was on the floor with medical staff surrounding me. Through my blurred vision, I could see the receptionist hovering nearby, repeatedly muttering that she didn't understand, like a broken record. They strapped me to a gurney and rushed me to the ambulance. When they wheeled me out, the doctor was still reprimanding the receptionist about proper protocol and the dangers of dismissing potentially serious symptoms. The following week, after I recovered from what turned out to be severe dehydration combined with a mild concussion, apparently I'd hit my head during one of my many trips to the bathroom, I received a formal written apology from the medical practice. They told me that the receptionist had been required to undergo additional training and had been moved to a position with no patient contact. They also waived all my treatment fees. I still sometimes think about how differently things could have turned out if I hadn't gone back that second time. The doctor later told me that my condition could have become critical within hours if left untreated. No one should have to fight to receive medical attention when they're clearly in distress. As a single mom balancing freelance writing from home, I always make it a point to carve out quality time for my 7-year-old son. Our afternoons at the playground have become a cherished ritual, giving him a chance to play and me an opportunity to catch some fresh air while tackling work on my laptop. That day started like any other. I had just finished a big project for a regular client, and to celebrate, I decided to take the entire afternoon off to play with my son instead of just supervising from the bench. The playground was unusually empty for a Tuesday afternoon, with only a handful of kids running around. I was pushing my son on the swings when I noticed them, a woman and her boy who looked about 9 or 10. Something felt off about them from the moment they arrived. The boy was kicking rocks around aggressively while his mother was busy talking loudly on her phone about someone she was planning to sue for discrimination at her workplace. My son asked to go play on the slide, so I followed him there, keeping a watchful eye on the other pair. The woman, let's call her Karen, was now sitting on a bench, still engaged in her heated phone conversation, completely ignoring her son who had wandered to the area behind the playground where people sometimes dump trash. That's when I saw it. The boy was holding something he'd picked up from the ground, a used syringe. My heart nearly stopped. I called out to the woman, trying to warn her that her son had found something dangerous. She barely looked up from her phone, just waved her hand dismissively, and told me to mind my own business, claiming her son knew what he was doing. Her son was now walking toward the playground, holding the syringe like a weapon. My son was at the top of the slide, completely unaware of what was happening. The other boy started climbing up, syringe in hand, with a disturbing grin on his face. I shouted at her to get her son away from mine. She finally got off her phone and yelled back, telling me not to tell her son what to do, insisting he was just playing. Her boy was getting closer to my son, who was now frozen in fear at the top of the slide. What happened next still gives me nightmares. Karen actually encouraged her son, telling him to show my boy what happens when people try to hog the slide. I ran to the slide as fast as I could. The boy had the syringe raised, ready to strike when I grabbed him by the waist and lifted him off the platform, carefully avoiding the syringe which fell to the ground. My son scrambled down the slide, crying. Karen erupted like a volcano, screaming about, "How dare I touch her precious baby?" She started yelling that this was assault, over and over. She charged at me like a raging bull, but I stood my ground. When she tried to grab my shirt, I instinctively shoved her back, hard. She fell flat on her back, the wind knocked out of her. Her son started wailing. By this time, several people who had been walking their dogs nearby had gathered around. One of them had already called the police while another was recording everything on their phone. From her position on the ground, Karen kept screaming that she was going to press charges, claiming that I had attacked her and her son and insisting they were innocent victims. The police arrived within minutes. Karen jumped up, practically running to them with her rehearsed victim story. But between the witnesses, the phone footage, and the used syringe still lying on the ground, the truth was pretty clear. The officers separated us to take statements. One of them radioed for a hazardous waste disposal team to handle the syringe. While they were questioning Karen, I overheard something that made my blood boil even more. This wasn't the first time she and her son had been involved in a playground incident. They had been banned from 2 other parks in the area for similar aggressive behavior. Karen was handcuffed and put in the police car, screaming about her lawyers and demanding everyone's badge numbers. Her son was taken into temporary custody while they contacted his father, who apparently had been fighting for full custody for months. The responding officers took the situation very seriously, especially given the dangerous weapon involved. They told me that Karen would be charged with child endangerment, reckless behavior, and attempted assault with a dangerous weapon through proxy. Her son would be required to undergo psychological evaluation and counseling. One of the witnesses, a nurse who lived nearby, came up to me afterward and praised my quick thinking. She explained how that syringe could have been contaminated with anything and told me I had stopped what could have been a real tragedy. The police recommended we press charges, which we did. The court case was surprisingly quick given the evidence and Karen's history. She lost custody of her son to his father, was sentenced to jail time, and was banned from all public playgrounds in the county. My son and I still go to the playground, but now I'm part of a neighborhood watch group that keeps an eye on all the local parks. We've worked with the city to install better lighting and security cameras and started a community program to keep the areas clean and safe for all children. I'm the first girlfriend of a man who unfortunately passed away last year. We dated for 5 years during college, and though we eventually went our separate ways, we remained good friends. He went on to marry another woman, had 2 boys with her, and built a life I was genuinely happy he achieved. During our relationship, my grandmother left me her cottage in her will. It was a special place for us. We spent countless weekends there during college, dreaming about our future. When we broke up, he insisted I keep the cottage in my name, saying it was my family's legacy. We stayed in touch over the years, and he would occasionally rent the cottage from me for family vacations with his wife and kids. Last summer, he was diagnosed with aggressive cancer. Before he passed, he asked to speak with me privately. He expressed concern about his wife's financial habits and asked if I would consider letting his sons inherit the cottage when they turned 25. I agreed, but we kept it informal. He trusted me to honor our agreement. After his passing, his wife, my former friend, started acting strange. She demanded immediate ownership of the cottage, claiming her husband had promised it to their sons. I explained our arrangement, but she wouldn't listen. Yesterday, I received a shocking text from my brother-in-law. He accused me of stealing money from his nephews that their father had left them. He claimed I had put their mother in debt with the cottage that should rightfully belong to them. He even questioned why his brother, who supposedly hadn't spoken to me in years, was suddenly my best friend, calling us both terrible people for allowing this situation. I responded by explaining that I didn't understand his accusations, as the cottage was my property and I had already agreed to transfer it to the boys when they turned 25. He dismissed my explanation entirely, telling me to stay away from his family. He mentioned that the boys had another uncle who would ensure they wouldn't go without and would keep paying the cottage debt until it became theirs. I tried to clarify that there was no cottage debt since I owned it outright, and that his brother and I had a clear agreement about the boys' inheritance. But he wouldn't listen. He told me not to contact them unless I was ready to return the money I had supposedly taken, adding that I would be blocked unless I had good news for the boys. I was furious. Their mother had apparently been telling everyone that her late husband had paid for the cottage and that I'd somehow stolen it. She'd even claimed there was a mortgage she was struggling to pay, completely fabricated. I decided to set the record straight. I posted all the property documentation on social media, showing my grandmother's will, my clear ownership, and proof there was no mortgage. I also shared email exchanges between their father and me, discussing the inheritance plan for when the boys turned 25. Their mother had a meltdown. She'd been collecting cottage maintenance money from family members for months, claiming she needed help with the mortgage payments. When everyone realized there was no mortgage, they demanded to know where their money had gone. She blocked me on social media after I posted "F you" by Lily Allen, which felt appropriate given the circumstances. But the damage was done. Her own family was furious about being scammed, and now they're demanding she return their money. What made the situation even more interesting was that her closest cousin reached out to me privately. She revealed that this wasn't the first time she'd pulled something like this. Apparently, she had a history of creating fake financial emergencies to extract money from family members. She'd once claimed she needed urgent surgery and collect thousands from relatives, only for them to discover later that she'd used the money for a luxury vacation. The cousin also shared that she'd been spreading vicious rumors about me at family gatherings, painting me as a gold digger who had manipulated her husband during his final days. This explained why some family members had been sending me hostile messages. But now, with the truth out in the open, those same people were apologizing to me and sharing their own stories of her deceptions. The boy's grandfather, her former father-in-law, was upset about the whole situation. He had given her a significant amount of money for these supposed cottage payments, money that was meant to help with the boy's education. He is now taking legal action to recover the funds and has asked me to help ensure the cottage stays protected for his grandson's future. The boys are still set to inherit the cottage when they turn 25. I've put it in writing with my lawyer to ensure it happens. But their mother isn't allowed on the property anymore, a decision supported by her own family after discovering her lies. I've also set up a trust fund for the boys' future maintenance of the cottage, with their grandfather is co-trustee to ensure their mother can't access any more money using the property as an excuse. The family has rallied around the boys, making sure they're protected from their mother's schemes while still maintaining their relationship with her. I've kept my distance from the drama but maintain regular contact with their grandfather to ensure everything stays on track for the boys' inheritance. I never planned to work in hospitality. My dream was to become a writer, but life had other plans. After my parents lost their business during the recession, I had to drop out of university to help support the family. That's how I ended up working as a lobby boy at this fancy hotel in London. The job wasn't bad. Most of the time I just handled guest requests, extra pillows, blankets, that sort of thing. We had a simple system. Guests would tell reception what they needed. Reception would write it in a notebook, and I'd check the book regularly to take care of everything. My boss, the hotel manager, was one of those people who thought they knew everything about everything. She'd been running the hotel for 20 years and believed that made her an expert in every possible field, from cooking to engineering. That night started like any other. I was doing my regular rounds when I noticed a new note in the book. The boss had written that the hot water tap wasn't working in room 307. I went up to check it out. The tap wouldn't budge. Now, in the UK, we have separate taps for hot and cold water, and this hot water tap was completely stuck. I tried everything I could think of, but nothing worked. So I went back and wrote in the book that I couldn't fix it and we needed to call a plumber. 20 minutes later, I checked the book again and found a new message from the boss demanding that I fix it now, with 3 aggressive underlines. The 3 underlines made it clear she wasn't messing around. But here's the thing. I'm not a plumber. Still, she was the boss, so I went back to try again. I tried turning the tap with more force this time. That's when it happened. The pipe connecting the tap to the wall suddenly popped out, and scalding hot water started spraying everywhere like a fire hose. I started panicking, muttering "oh no" repeatedly under my breath as I grabbed the room phone and tried calling reception. Busy. Of course it was busy. I sprinted through the hotel like I was running a marathon, burst into reception, and frantically told them we needed a plumber in room 307 immediately. Then I ran back to hold the pipe directing the water into the bathtub to prevent the room from flooding. The bathroom quickly turned into a steam room, and I was sweating buckets. 3 minutes later, my boss appeared in the doorway. Her face went from angry to ghostly white in seconds, and she disappeared faster than she came. The steam got so thick that it set off the fire alarms. I could hear guests in the hallway asking if there was a fire, while staff members rushed to assure everyone it was just a false alarm. Finally, after what felt like forever, they managed to shut off the water supply to that wing of the hotel. The plumber arrived shortly after and fixed the tap in 3 minutes flat. My boss tried to brush it off, suggesting it wasn't that bad, but I insisted we should check the lower floors. She questioned why, claiming the water had gone into the bathtub, but I knew better. I went down 1 floor and found the bathroom light mysteriously dim. That's when I saw it. The ceiling lamp was completely filled with water, with the light bulb just chilling in there like a fish in a bowl. I let out a worried gasp as I realized the potential danger. I carefully drained the lamp and cleaned up, but something still felt off, so I went down to the ground floor. The corridor ceiling had completely collapsed, leaving a massive hole and debris everywhere. After cleaning everything up, I finally stepped outside for some fresh air. My roommate walked by and did a double take, asking if someone had thrown up on me. I explained that I'd had a fight with a hot water tap, and the tap had won. The next morning, my boss called me into her office. She told me that the repair bill had come to £3,000. When I reminded her that I had said I couldn't fix it, she acknowledged her mistake. She announced that from now on, when maintenance staff say they can't fix something, they'll call professionals. She never questioned my judgment again, and I got a raise the following week. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.